Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Beverly McKeever, and I am a painter. And I was a Radcliffe Fellow in 2002, 2003. That's where I met Jean Jordan, who was also a Radcliffe Fellow, and who I am currently collaborating with. She's been following me for the last 5.5 years and making a documentary about my life. So I'm going to start by just showing you some of my work. This is my mother, Ethel McKeever. And let's see, I hope I have this right. We grew up in a housing project. My mother, Ethel McKeever, worked as a maid. She did ironing and cleaned houses for white people. She also raised their children as if they were her own. She spent lots of time with these families, enough so that I became jealous of the children that she took care of. I have two sisters. My sister Ronnie, which I don't know if I could, she's the one in the middle in front of the red piano, is my middle sister, and my sister Renee is the oldest, who is on the far left. My cousin Sharon, who has the roller at the front of her head, she too grew up with us and is like a sister. My older sister Renee was diagnosed at birth as being mentally disabled. That is, she has the mindset of a third grader, even though she's 49 years old today. It was difficult growing up with Renee, as she was violent. Renee also has epilepsy. When Renee didn't get her way, she would trigger a seizure, and that would disrupt all of us. We couldn't go out, we couldn't do anything because Renee was having a seizure. I made these paintings that you see on the screen to express what it's like to grow up in the shadows of Renee. It was a challenge for me to move from behind her shadow. In 2003, I received a fellowship from Radcliffe. This was by far the best year of my life. I want to come back, please, let me come back. This is where I met Jean Jordan, a filmmaker who had a studio next door to mine. Jean would come into my studio and quietly stare at my paintings, and she would later say, "They remind me of film stills." I also met my dear friend Mark Robbins, who was also a Radcliffe Fellow that year. It was Mark who would take many pictures of me, which I entitled a series called Radcliffe Girl. So this is Radcliffe Girl 1. Radcliffe Girl 2. I did several Radcliffe Girls. I also made a series, this is another Radcliffe Girl. See, wasn't I happy? I also made a series of paintings entitled Mourning Elizabeth. This is Elizabeth. Elizabeth was my college art teacher and the person who taught me how to paint. Elizabeth told me that if I worked hard, that I could be good at painting. The year that I was at Radcliffe, Elizabeth committed suicide down in North Carolina. So I made these series of paintings entitled Mourning Elizabeth. And this painting is in this building downstairs because I donated it to the Radcliffe School. These are all Mourning Elizabeth. In 2004, life would change again for me. My mom died of pancreatic cancer. It was her wish when she died that I would take care of Renee. I was currently living in New York City at the time, so I had to move back to Arizona, where I had a teaching job at Arizona State, and Renee moved in with me. Renee, loved my mother, and my mother took such great care of her that filling my mother's shoes seemed impossible to me. I had no idea of the magnitude of what I had promised my mother. Actually, I thought that my mother would never die and that I would never have to take on that responsibility. But Renee adjusted masterfully to her new surroundings. She continued to make potholders, and she ate constantly. Raising Renee alone in Arizona became very difficult for me, and I decided to move back to North Carolina, just an hour outside of where I grew up. So these are paintings just expressing my sadness over my mother's death, and also like this new occupation of taking care of Renee. When I moved back to North Carolina, the first thing that we knew was that my mother was no longer there. This is the house that we moved into just 2 years ago in Durham. And Renee is just happy to be back. She loves being back in North Carolina, and she loves the surrounding and all the seasons that we get. This is Renee with our 2 cats, which is her job, is to take care of them. She does a very good job. Again, even though we're in comfortable surroundings in North Carolina, I still felt like it was difficult and challenging for me to take care of Renee. But we've managed to get along well, and we've managed to take care of each other. Despite everything, we do love each other. I also created a new series of work entitled Dear God. This is Renee and I on a cruise. I now do arts and crafts and watch kid movies like Madagascar. And this is us standing in front of my mom's painting. I also started a series of paintings entitled Dear God when I returned back to North Carolina. The series of paintings consists of 16 paintings with different stories across the top. So this one's like, I'm moving back to North Carolina. My therapist says it'll be different this time, that I'm not that girl from the projects, but I'm a professional, middle-class person. Here they are, all hanging together. The stories range from experiences that I've had at the DMV when I couldn't pass the test 3 times, they failed me in North Carolina, to Jean's father dying. And finally, I've had the opportunity to grieve my mother's death. Something that I couldn't do in Arizona because I was so busy taking care of Renee. A little depressed, sorry. And then, last but not least, this is my most recent piece, no pun intended, of me finding peace in North Carolina. But life never seems to stop changing. And things just keep on rolling and keep on changing, and you'll have to see the film Raising Renee in order to know what comes next. Thank you very much.
I'm Jean Jordan. Beverly's introduced me, so in 2002 and 2003, I had the honor of having a Radcliffe Fellowship. I spent the year editing a film my husband, Stephen Asher, and I had done, or were doing, called So Much So Fast. It's about the Haywood family's battle with ALS. It premiered at the Sundance Film Festival and is shown all over the world, including on PBS's Frontline. 10 years before that, I had a Bunting Fellowship, during which I edited Steve in my film called Troublesome Creek, which was about my family's farm in Iowa. It won Sundance and was nominated for an Academy Award and was a great thrill. So as you see, Radcliffe has been very, very, very good to me and has made all the difference in my career. While I was working on So Much So Fast in 2002, I was also getting to know the other fellows, which is indeed, as other people have said, the best part of Radcliffe. In the studio next to mine was Beverly McKeever, and throughout the year, I marveled at Beverly's tremendous productivity. Like, is the tortoise and the hare, or, documentary filmmaking is so slow, especially because I love time-based documentary. And watching Bev have these bursts, I mean, what did you do, 34 paintings in a year? I mean, I was just like, I think I'd like to be a painter, except I can't paint. I also realized what a wonderful storyteller Beverly is, and humorist. When she told you today that she told her mother she'd take care of Renee, and the way she talks about it, She really does make it sound easy, even though she doesn't think it's easy. But during our Radcliffe year, when her mother, Ethel, was hale and hearty, Beverly was struggling with that promise and what it really meant. And we talked about that a lot. For a filmmaker always looking for a good story, with good visuals, of course, Beverly was a revelation. She illustrates her life in the most vibrant way, and the layers of painting, photographer, family stories, and just genuine openness that Beverly brings to the world, it made the idea of a film about her a natural for Steve and I. And she was good enough to let us start filming at the end of that year. We got to know Ethel, Renee, your sister Ronnie, and have followed all the twists and turns of Bev's life. Now, when Beverly agreed that we could do a film about her, I truly do not think that she thought 5 years later we'd still be planning to come down next week and film. But that's the nature of our beast. The film is called Raising Renee, and Steve and I think of it as the third in a trilogy about families in crisis. I'm sure when Bev agreed, she thought it would be out in the world by now. It's almost there. I'm going to show you a very short 4-minute excerpt that gives you just an idea about it. But it's been funded by HBO, and it should be on in 2010. So let's take a look. About Renee.
She makes potholders. Renee was born mentally disabled. She has the mindset of a third grader.
Remove the pain, Lord.
Appreciate your prayers, but it's fine if you can't come over.
She couldn't imagine she was not going to be here.
Would have been broken if that Negro had stayed. Excuse me for saying Negro so much. That's my usual vernacular.
I grew up in the projects in Greensboro, North Carolina. When I was 17, the Klan showed up with guns and killed 5 people right in front of our house. Everybody knew that I had made this promise. So everybody was asking me, what are you going to do about Renee? Damn, I got to get that macaroni and cheese cooked. Before I go to work tomorrow, she won't have any lunch. Oh my God, my life as an artist has gone down the tubes. Kind of like me and Renee, like Renee said she wanted to get a boyfriend.
He has the master plan. Yes. If you worrying about something, stop it. Thank you, Lord.
I like it.
I'll just start out with a question really for all our panelists, having to do with translation. 2 of these are collaborative projects, and in a sense you could say that all of them are collaborative projects if you think of yourself, Tariq, as collaborating in some sense with the dead. So I suppose my question would be, what are the challenges involved for each of you in transposing one medium into another, text into music, or painting into film, or courtroom discourse into film? What's difficult to translate? What gets lost in translation?
I wanted to say for Beverly and my collaboration, I did see Beverly's work very much as film stills, but also many of her work started as photographs. She was saying our friend Mark Robbins, who is here, took pictures of her that year, and it was like layer on layer on layer. And I felt like film was the logical extension of what she was doing. All the stories of her life are really in her film. I mean, I was very taken with a whole series of hanging out the laundry paintings that she's done with her mother and Renee. And they spoke to me about my childhood in Iowa, and there were many moments like that that really reached across. But one thing I do want to say is that one of the real ways that you can translate the truth in a documentary, as far as I'm concerned, is time, is people really knowing you and you knowing them. Beverly and I got to know each other quite well during our year at Radcliffe, but we know each other a whole lot better now. And I think that every film that I've done in my life that has meant the most to me are films where people trust the camera that's in front of them and the person that's behind that camera. So.
Well, one thing that I want to say about collaborating is that, that I've had to remind myself over and over again is that even though this is my story, this is Jeannie and Steve telling my story. And so things that, I always call them, they say, just call us if you're doing anything. And I call them, I say, hey, I'm giving a lecture, don't you want to film it? And they say, no. I say, hey, I'm doing this, don't you want to film it? And they say, no. And then I say, oh, by the way, Renee's moving next week. Would you like to come down and film it? And they say, what? Yeah, of course we do. So I never have any idea of what's important and what's not important.
That's why we bug her all the time.
All the time.